The Cravatian Empire had ruled the outer spiral for 3 centuries, and in all that time, no species had ever defied the arena. It was simple entertainment for the masses. Pit the weak against each other, watch them tear one another apart for survival, and remind the galaxy who held the chains. Today's spectacle was particularly amusing to the crowd. 5 Lixari cubs, barely past their first molt, stood trembling in the sand. Their blue-silver fur caught the harsh arena lights, and their oversized ears flattened against their skulls in terror. The youngest couldn't have been more than 7 standard cycles old. The crime? Their colony ship had strayed into restricted space. The punishment? Death by combat against each other. Overlord. Thexvar leaned forward in his viewing box, his chitinous mandibles clicking with anticipation. The crowd of 30,000 roared, a deafening wave of bloodlust that shook the very foundations of the Colosseum. Holographic displays floated above the arena, showing close-ups of each cub's terrified face to every corner of the stadium. "Release the weapons," Thexvar commanded. Magnetic fields shimmered, and 5 crude blades clattered onto the sand near the cubs. The eldest, Rin, his identification chip broadcasted to the crowd, reached toward one with a shaking paw, then stopped. His golden eyes swept across his siblings, then up to the impossible height of the arena walls. The crowd's roar intensified, chanting in their harsh language, "Fight! Fight! Fight!" But Rin didn't pick up the blade. Instead, he did something that silenced the nearest sections of the crowd. He sat down. His tail curled around his legs, and he looked directly at the Overlord's box with an expression that wasn't defiance, but something else. Something the Cravatians didn't recognize. Resignation mixed with dignity. The other 4 cubs watched him, confusion and fear warring in their young faces. The second eldest, a female with a scar across her muzzle, took a tentative step toward a weapon. Rin made a soft chirping sound, the Lixari equivalent of a mother's comfort call. She stopped, looked at him, and slowly sat down beside him. One by one, the others followed. The crowd's chanting faltered, confusion rippling through the stands. This wasn't how the arena worked. Victims were supposed to fight, supposed to prove the Empire's doctrine that all species would abandon morality when survival was at stake. That's what made it entertaining, watching the weak reveal their true savage nature. "What are they doing?" Thexvar hissed, his composure cracking. "Activate the pain fields." But before the technician could comply, a voice cut across the arena's communication system, a human voice, speaking in perfect Cravatian. "I invoke the right of champion." The crowd erupted into chaos. The right of champion was an ancient law, barely remembered from the Empire's earliest days. It stated that any warrior could claim the condemned sentence as their own, fighting in their place. It hadn't been invoked in over 200 years because no one was foolish enough to volunteer for certain death. A section of the arena floor split open, and a lift rose from the preparation chambers below. Standing on it, arms crossed and face carved from stone, was Captain Ellen Ward of the human exploration vessel Defiance. The Cravatians had captured her ship 3 cycles ago. She'd watched her crew executed one by one, had endured their interrogations, their torture, their attempts to break her spirit. Through it all, she'd said nothing, given them nothing except her name, rank, and a cold stare that had unsettled even the most hardened guards. She wore the tattered remains of her uniform, and scars crisscrossed her dark skin like a map of survival. But her eyes burned with something the Cravatians had never seen before. Not rage, not fear, but an absolute, unshakable certainty. "The human speaks madness," Thexvar announced, though his voice wavered. "She has no standing. I have every standing." Ellen interrupted, her voice amplified across the arena. "I am a sentient being witnessing an injustice. According to your own ancient codes you ignore when convenient, that gives me the right. Or has the great Cravatian Empire grown so soft that it fears its own laws?" The crowd fell into an uncertain silence. Thexvar's mandibles ground together. If he refused, he'd appear weak before the entire Empire. If he accepted, he'd be sending his best arena champion against a human, and humans, though rare in this sector, had a disturbing reputation. They didn't know when to die. "Very well," Thexvar finally said. "You will face Cormac the Render. When he tears you apart, the cubs will still die, slowly." Ellen's expression didn't change. She walked toward Rin and his siblings, kneeling in the sand before them. She placed a hand on Rin's head and the cub's ears perked up slightly. "What you did?" she said softly, in their language. She'd learned it during the 3 months she'd been imprisoned near their holding cell. "Was the bravest thing I've ever seen. You chose love over survival. That's not weakness. That's what makes you stronger than any empire." Rin's eyes widened. You will die for us?" "Maybe," Ellen replied, standing and stretching her shoulders. "But I've been doing that my whole career. It's kind of my thing." She looked up at the crowd, then at the Overlord's box. "Besides, humans have a saying, 'Not on my watch.'" The arena gates exploded outward, and Cormac emerged, 4 meters of scaled muscle, with 6 arms ending in razor claws and a mouth that could swallow a human whole. The crowd roared back to life, their bloodlust rekindled. Ellen picked up one of the crude blades meant for the cubs. It was pathetically small in her hand, barely longer than a knife. Cormac laughed, a sound like grinding rocks. "Human," he growled. "I have killed 300 warriors. You have no armor, no proper weapon. What do you have?" Ellen smiled then, not a happy smile, but the smile of someone who'd walked through hell and found it disappointing. "I have what those cubs showed you," she said. "I have a reason to fight that's bigger than myself," she charged. What happened next would be spoken of in whispers across the galaxy for generations. Ellen Ward fought like humans always fought, with impossible determination, with tactical brilliance born from being the underdog species for all of history, and with the kind of creative brutality that came from evolving on a death world. She didn't win easily. Cormac's claws opened gashes across her arms and torso, but every time he struck, she struck back, using his size against him, targeting joints and eyes, moving with the desperate efficiency of someone who'd been fighting gravity since birth. When Cormac finally fell, his throat opened by the crude blade turned into something more deadly in the right hands. The arena was silent. Ellen stood over him, blood mixing with sand, breathing heavily. She looked up at Thexvar and her voice carried across the stunned crowd. The cubs go free. That was the deal. 3 days later, the Lixeri colony ship, with Rin and his siblings aboard, crossed back into free space. With them was Captain Ellen Ward, battered but alive. Exchanged for a ransom the Kravatians demanded but would never admit, was because they feared what she represented. As their ship jumped to light speed, Rin sat beside Ellen in the medical bay. "Why did you teach us that?" he asked. "To not fight?" Ellen looked at the small cub, then smiled, a real smile this time. "I didn't teach you that. You already knew it. You just reminded me that even in the darkest places, compassion is the most powerful weapon in the universe." The cubs were sentenced to the arena. The crowd went still when they refused to fight. But the galaxy would never forget what happened when one human decided that stillness deserved to be defended.